In today's video, we'll explore how immigration, internal migration, and economic transformation changed the face of American society during the first half of the 19th century. From the docks of New York to the mills of Massachusetts, from farms in the Ohio River Valley to the grand homes of New York City's elite, the market revolution was more than a shift in how goods were produced. It was a reordering of American life. Let's get started. At the dawn of the 19th century, immigration played a surprisingly small role in the American population. In fact, by 1830, foreign born residents made up less than 4% of the country's population. But that was about to change. The 1840s saw the beginning of an immigration boom, driven by three major forces: declining transportation costs thanks to the market revolution, growing job opportunities in the United States, and worsening economic conditions in Europe. By 1850, immigrants made up 10% of the population. Between 1840 and 1850, over 1.5 million Europeans crossed the Atlantic. The next decade, that number soared to 2.5 million. By the 1850s, nearly half of New York City's residents were recent immigrants, and cities like St. Louis, Chicago, and Milwaukee experienced similar waves of newcomers. But notably, few immigrants settled in the South. The vast majority of these immigrants came from Ireland and Germany. The Irish, most of whom were Catholic, typically remained in the eastern cities where they arrived. They became part of the unskilled labor force, and interestingly, the largest group among them were young, single women working in factories or domestic work. German immigrants, also often Catholic, had a different trajectory. Many arrived with some financial resources and moved into the Northwest, places like Ohio and Wisconsin, where they became farmers or opened small businesses. But migration wasn't just happening from abroad. Americans themselves were on the move. As agriculture in New England became less profitable, many residents left. Some moved west to pursue farming in fertile new lands. Others relocated to booming eastern cities, drawn by new factory jobs and commercial opportunities. The construction of the Erie Canal and the rapid expansion of the railroad system played a major role in this internal migration, especially west of the Appalachians. Towns and cities along the Ohio and Mississippi rivers flourished. In fact, even white yeoman farmers from the South moved into Ohio, trying to escape the economic grip of the plantation system and slavery. Cities like Cleveland in Ohio and other cities across the Midwest also grew rapidly, fueled by the rise of manufacturing and transportation networks. With immigration on the rise, so too came the backlash. This growing immigrant population provoked a surge in nativism, a fear and hostility towards foreign born people. Many so called Native Americans, ironically themselves descendants of earlier immigrants, claimed that the newcomers were racially inferior, political radicals, and job stealers. The fact that most Irish and German immigrants were Catholic only deepened the divide. Anti Catholic sentiment became a powerful component of American nativism. This animosity gave rise to the Know Nothing Party, a political group founded on nativist ideals that sought to limit immigrant influence and protect American labor and culture. But while tensions flared, American society was also undergoing major demographic changes. In 1831, French aristocrat Alexis de Tocqueville visited the United States and wrote Democracy in America. He was struck by the seeming lack of rigid class divisions, writing that the whole society seems to have turned into one middle class. While that was an oversimplification, there was truth to his observation. During the market revolution, America did see the rapid growth of a middle class, especially in small towns and urban centers. Business owners, merchants, and professionals formed a new social group that was neither poor nor wealthy, but comfortable. Middle class families moved into solid, respectable homes that lined growing city streets. Many owned their houses for the first time. Middle class women often stayed at home. Some even hired servants to help run the household. New technologies like the cast iron stove changed how families cooked, and some wealthier homes even acquired ice boxes to store fresh food longer. Homes also changed in layout and design. Kitchens were separated from dining rooms and parlors, giving rise to more elaborate Victorian styles of living. But not everyone was moving up the social ladder. As some Americans grew wealthier, the gap between rich and poor widened significantly. Merchants and industrialists accumulated vast fortunes, and in cities like New York, a culture of conspicuous wealth emerged. Wealthy elites built grand mansions, rode in ornate carriages, and imported fine foods from around the world. Social clubs and elegant parties became routine among the upper class. Even Central Park, whose construction began in the 1850s, was partially a response to pressure from high society. They wanted a beautiful public space for their daily carriage rides. Meanwhile, machines began to replace skilled artisans, forcing many former craftsmen into unskilled labor. The laboring poor grew in number, especially among women, freed Black Americans, and immigrants. Wages dropped, working conditions worsened, and the divide between those who owned the factories and those who worked in them became increasingly pronounced. The market revolution didn't just change where Americans lived or how they worked, it also redefined gender roles. New jobs in textile mills and factories opened opportunities for women, particularly young women who came from rural families. The Laos system in Massachusetts recruited girls from farm families, usually in their late teens or early 20s, to work in the textile mills. These women earned about $2.50 to $3.25 a week, which they often saved before returning home to marry. They lived in company boarding houses, were closely supervised, and followed very strict rules: no alcohol, no gambling, and a 10 p.m. curfew. Despite the discipline, Lao became a hub of social life for these young women. At its peak, women made up 85% of Lao mill workers, but not a single one held a management role. Over time, though, as wages dropped and conditions worsened, poor Irish immigrants, often men, replaced women in these roles. Meanwhile, as industrial jobs drew men out of the home and into offices or factories, the household increasingly became the domain of women. This development gave rise to the cult of domesticity, the idea that women were best suited for the private domestic sphere. Women were expected to keep clean, orderly homes, raise moral children, entertain guests, and stay clear of politics or wage work. This ideal was reinforced across class lines and became a defining feature of the 19th century American life, even as women's roles continued to evolve in reality. So, what do we make of this period? The years between 1830 and 1860 were transformative. Immigration surged, American families moved westward, cities expanded, and industry changed how people lived and worked. New opportunities emerged for some, especially in the middle class, but so too did new challenges: a growing wealth gap, social tensions, and strict definitions of gender and class. Migration, both international and internal, reshaped the American experience. And in doing so, it set the stage for the tensions, reforms, and conflicts that would define the coming decades. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.